Hello. With this video, I will start a series of videos on the monopoly problem. Before we begin, quick recap what the monopoly model assumes. Four things that we need to talk about. There is a single firm in the market. The firm produces output that has no close substitutes. So that means that if you don't like the firm's output, there is nobody else you can buy similar output from. Obviously, the firm is able to set its own price, and there are high barriers to entry, so it's very unlikely that any other firms will try to compete with a monopoly and try to enter into that market. And so, in a narrow sense, the monopoly model talks about the particular industries where there are no close substitutes, like local utility companies that are real monopolies in today's economy. But in a broader sense, you can think about any firm with a downward slope in demand curve trying to solve the monopoly problem of figuring out which price will maximize the profit in the market that the company serves to. And so we're going to look at a numeric problem which does exactly that. So suppose that a monopoly has the inverse demand of price equal 120 minus 3 times the quantity, and the total costs are quadratic. So there is a 250, the fixed term, plus 40 times the quantity, plus quantity squared. And the question for a monopoly is as follows. Which price-quantity combination will maximize the monopoly's profit? So pretty much the monopoly is free to set its price anywhere on the demand curve, and then the demand curve will tell it what quantity it will be able to sell at that price, and the monopoly will have to decide, well, is that the appropriate price-quantity combination, or should price be different? Before we talk about the monopoly problem, I want to make one clarification. What is the difference between a demand function and an inverse demand function? So here, I'm talking about the inverse demand. The idea is as follows. The inverse demand, it treats the function as the function of quantity. So it's price as the function of quantity. I give you the quantity produced, and the inverse demand tells me what price I can sell the output for. For the demand, the regular way, the one that you should be more used to, quantity is the function of price because, well, we make a price decision and the demand tells us which quantity demanded will correspond to that price. So to obtain the demand function from the inverse demand function, you need to look at the inverse demand equation and solve it for quantity instead of the price. So let's just do that to practice it. So here I have this inverse demand equation. Price equals 120 minus 3 times the quantity. And so the first step is I'm going to isolate the quantity term on the right by moving 120 to the left. And so subtracting 120 from both sides of the equation gives us price minus 120 is negative 3 quantity. So move 120 to the left-hand side of the equation, changing the sign. Second step that I'm going to take is I'm going to multiply this equation by -1 so that the coefficient in front of the quantity becomes positive, and so we will avoid confusion down the road. So multiplying everything by -1 means changing the signs in front of everything. So it's going to be 120. We had -120, so now it's going to be 120. We had a positive price, now it's going to be a negative price. And we had -3 quantity, now it's going to be a positive 3 quantity. So our new equation is 120 minus the price is 3 times the quantity. And the last step, divide both sides by 3 to get an expression in terms of quantity. So 120 over 3 minus 1/3 of the price equals quantity. And to make things nicer, let's write the quantity on the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side, and let's replace 120 over 3 with 40. So that gives us the demand equation of quantity equals 40 minus 1/3 the price. So let's put them side by side now. We have the inverse demand, price equals 120 minus 3q. We have the demand, quantity equals 40 minus 1/3 the price. These two equations represent one and the same relationship, and the only difference is the first equation expresses price in terms of quantity, And this is kind of the inverse way of thinking about the demand function. Whereas the second equation expresses quantity in terms of the price, which is kind of the standard way of thinking about the demand. And one final observation is that the slope of the demand function is -1/3. We're always looking, when we're talking about the slope of the demand, we're always looking at the coefficient in front of the price in the demand equation, not the inverse demand equation. And let's remember that fact, and we will use it in a later video. Thank you.